Yeah. I was thinking about like how I'm trying to connect what you said, and I think to what we were just talking about here, and I think a lot of it has to do with doing generous work. I think Mike mentioned this. I remember once that all of our work we should be generous because we should always find a way to give back. And this doesn't mean giving everything away for free. What it means, I guess, is being generous with our energy, with our emotional labor to actually help somebody else. And I find that we do that in many different ways. We do that on Instagram with our posts. We do that with lives. We do that when Mike and Andrew are when you guys are replying to teachers on Facebook. Always finding ways to through the podcast, whatever. Our focus should, I mean, your focus, if you're listening to this, your focus should always be on creating a change in the world that creates impact for some person or people, you know? So
Yeah.
if we're being generous, I think that's, yeah, Mike, go ahead.
No, no, and it starts, Leo, with being generous to yourself, right? So this
Yeah.
goes back to answer Andrew's original question, right? The reason that these kind of quick fixes don't work is because they're the object that the teacher is trying to chase is, say, perhaps a higher hourly wage, when really
Yeah.
the question they
It's the
should be
outcome.
asking is, what is it that I want to do? What is going to make me the happiest, the most fulfilled version of
Exactly.
myself? And that's the difficult question. And the only way to get there is to have that idea and know yourself and
Mm-hmm.
understand this is what's going to make me happy, and this
Yeah.
is my vision I have for myself. And then to do what you and Leo, what you and Andrew have just talked about, start to just take actions and show up every day and start shipping and getting to that
Yes.
position where you are doing what you are loving what you're doing, and in return
Mm-hmm.
that's adding something out there in the world that other people are learning from,
Yes.
growing from, and improving, right?
And it
Yeah.
takes courage, you know. You don't
Yes.
want to just do something that everybody else is doing, you know. the
Mm-hmm.
the path of least resistance is to keep doing what you're currently doing, or to do what everyone before you has already done. That's the, well, show me it works and I'll do it. Well, guess what?
Yeah.
Everyone else is already doing it.
And this is why the mindset, this is why I think one of the first things we do in the Teacher Accelerator program is to talk about mindset. Because if you don't change your mindset, then chances are you're not going to be able to ship it. You're not going to be able to do the work that is required to actually start your business. You're going to still focus, as Mike said, you're going to focus primarily on the outcome, and you're going to fail to ship often enough. And again, the practice, like this idea of shipping, becomes your identity. And we've talked about this many, many times about how the way we act actually determines how we feel way more often than the way we feel determines how we act.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
going to
And I
say
would
this
say,
again.
yeah, say it again. Go
I'm going to say it again. The
do it.
way we act, because I will forget, the way we act determines how we feel way more often than the way we feel determines how we act. So the way you behave will kind of inform your identity.
Ideally, yeah, ideally that's exactly it, because otherwise you're shipping the wrong thing, right, Leo?
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise you're
Mm-hmm.
waking up every morning and you're teaching those 5 hours of classes every day, instead of building that business that you want to build, right? So because that's the fundamental difference between a teacherpreneur, or someone who wants to go out and freelance as a business project, and someone who just
Yeah.
wants to teach online, right? So the teacher online is just doing what Andrew's doing, right? They're going after that product, they're going after X dollars per hour, and that's it. Whereas the teacherpreneur actually has a vision. They have that
Mm-hmm.
product that is helping
Yeah.
society, helping individuals within
Yes.
society, and that is their main focus. And teaching is perhaps that's 80% of their focus is on developing that product and getting it out in the world. The actual 20% is the delivery of that, right? The main
Mm-hmm.
focus is them actually creating and helping build their actual business with business systems and business structures.
Yes.
The 20% is actual the teaching, if it is the actual delivery of the lessons, let's say. Yeah. So
Yeah.
one is goal based, I would argue. The other is just just simple, give me $50 an hour and I'll be happy. That's clearly not a business, folks, right?
Yeah.
That's not a business. You can't do that and call that a business. You're basically transferring from a school into an online classroom. You need to find out what you want to be, find out how that can help the world, and then spend 80% of your time getting it out there, 20% of your time delivering it and working with those individuals on bettering themselves.
I think the most important thing, if I were to say, I think for us, for us, I guess, for me as well, what I think we've fully understood about what we wanted to do, to go back to what Andrew said about how everything started with a napkin. I think we understood from that conversation that our work was ultimately for other people, not for us. We weren't doing something for ourselves. We wanted to improve the quality of teaching in Toronto, in the GTA, in Ontario, in Canada. We do the work to make a change happen. That's what we wanted. I think that's what we set out to do. But if you're not trying to create a change, then Mike, it goes back to what you said. It's just a hobby that you get paid for, right?
So which is fine, but I don't think you can call it a business, right? Like, because you're not putting a product out there that's helping society go forward. And I know, people could argue, but my classes do help, and I'm not saying that your classes don't help, but the intrinsic motivation from, if you looked internally at what processes are going on there, you're exchanging time for money. That's all you're doing. And really what you want to be doing is building an asset or a collection of assets that you can use to help improve yourself, improve the world, and live the best version of yourself possible. Trading teaching at a school for teaching online, I think many people who have done it would say that's not what they want, because they can only teach so many hours in a day. And those hours that you're spending teaching are taking away from those other valuable areas of your life, your own well-being, your own ability to spend time with your family, to develop personally as well. Sacrifice, right? They're all sacrificed for this one for one approach. So, not saying it's not good, Andrew, but I don't, to answer your question, the easy answer actually isn't getting at the root of the real problem, which is, how do I become a better individual? And while I'm doing that, wouldn't it be nice to help the world at the same time, or help others out there in the world at the same time?
I was going to say, the opposite of like what you were just describing before is the opposite of what we're talking about today. That's the disadvantage of an advantage. The advantage in the world we live in right now is it's easy to just go online, find students, and teach for fill in the blank dollar per hour. But over the long term, that actually turns itself into a disadvantage. The advantage is that it's the path of least resistance, and you can do it. There's no obstacles to set it up. Away you go. The disadvantage that it turns into is all those things that you just said, Mike. So what is then the advantage of the disadvantage? The disadvantage is, but Mike, I don't have an asset. I don't know how to create that asset. But Mike, I don't know all of these things. But Mike, it sounds really hard. Yeah, it is. Right. But that's your disadvantage. And then you turn it into an advantage somehow. I have a story for you guys that I want to share. And this comes from the book that I'm reading, David and Goliath, of course. So again, no sponsorship.
Have you finished
plugs.
the book,
No
by the way?
sponsorship. Yeah.
Almost. I'm like 3/4 of the way through. 3/4 of the way through. But I think there's a couple of stories that I hope we have time to share today. I think kind of illustrate what we're talking about, and not just what we're talking about, but this kind of what the direction that lots of people have taken, not just now, but throughout history. Are you guys fans of French art?
I only know Monet.
Monet, yeah.
Okay. That's the only one.
Monet. You're gonna get to hear me pronounce some French here, so this is your treat. So Monet,
nice.
Claude Monet, Edouard Manet, Edgar Degas, and Pierre Auguste Renoir.
All Renoir.
I'm sure we'll get comments on that pronunciation.
I'm sure.
But
I apologize to everybody.
Silently on the side here for you. Yeah, it's brave.
Those four people, again, according to the book, and Malcolm Gladwell is the author, basically invented what is now known as impressionism as an art form, or a genre of art, or, if you be, a niche of art. But in the 1860s, they were broke, struggling, and basically homeless. Their big question to each other was, what should we do about the Salon? And if you're not sure about what the Salon was, and I wasn't either until I read this book, it basically at that time was the biggest art show in the world. It was at the Louvre in France.
Okay.
And if you were an artist, you had to get your art into the Salon. If you weren't in the Salon, you were a nobody.
Right. Right.
But the art that these four gentlemen created was frowned upon. It was like a third class type of art. Impressionism was not a thing.
Right.
You don't paint
right.
still life. You don't paint what people are doing. This is not something
we know that it's already there. Yeah.
Not exactly. It's not something that society accepts, right? So being accepted into the Salon and furthering their career came at a cost. Creating art they didn't find meaningful.
Mm.
And risked being lost in the clutter of other artists, because in the Louvre there would be like thousands of paintings and
One of the same,
Right.
right?
all kind of blend in, and they all look the same because they don't accept a variety of different types or different niches of art, right? So they asked themselves this question: did they want to be a little fish in a big pond in the Salon, or did they want to be a big fish in a little pond of their own choosing? Obviously, again, very convenient and easy to look back, but history tells us that they made the right decision. We can find their art all over the world, some of the most best-selling paintings ever. But one has to wonder, if they had decided just to keep going to the Salon and creating art that they didn't like, that had no meaning to them, what would have happened?
Interesting.
Wow, that really resonates with me, right? Like in our experience that we just talked about. Yeah. Think about it,
Gladwell
right?
argues in the book that this choice still exists today, obviously, and most people, the vast majority of people, do not choose wisely. Rarely, he says, do we pause and ask if the seemingly best or most prestigious choice is actually in our own best interest.
Huh.
Yeah, well, you hear that lots of times, right? And I don't think it's just our field, right? You hear people say they wanted to become lawyers, and then they go into law,
Yeah.
and then they realize that it's disastrous for them on different levels, right? Maybe they become workaholics. They start to drink too much. They can't handle the pressure of dealing with clients. They take it out on their family. Right? Like there are professions. I mean, teachers, nurses. Like there are lots of quote unquote high stress jobs that and maybe even working for a particular school or at a particular level that seem quite prestigious, but carry with them other aspects that might take away from your overall well-being, and maybe really who you feel you are as a teacher and as an individual, right? So it suddenly becomes really hard to bloom where you're planted, because you're kind of, you find yourself kind of trapped or kind of sequestered to this one path again, all in the name of prestige or being recognized or viewed as one of them, right? Whereas perhaps it going off, doing your own thing, backing yourself while it's challenging might actually help you establish yourself as someone who is following following their own path, doing what they want to, doing what they love, helping people in the way that they feel that they can help them the most, and reaping the other rewards, good collocation, that go along with that, right? But I agree, yeah, it's hard to break off that kind of, I don't want to say predestined path, right? Because it's not. We all make decisions, but sure, I guess what he's saying, and I agree, is that most of us kind of tend to follow the flock, I guess, or the flock's expectations.
He says their greatest challenge was to advance without worrying about the opinion of other people.
Yes.
That was the biggest challenge. And obviously, again, convenient to look back. Obviously, these guys, probably after they died, did very well for themselves. But they could have stayed in the big pond. This big pond, small pond analogy, I think, is really apropos for what we do and what a lot of people do. They go on to say that small ponds, again, that big pond, you're a fish among many, you don't stand out. This is when, when some people say, why do I need a niche? Well, you don't have to have one, but think about all the fish in the pond. And
Yeah.
yes, it's a metaphor, but you don't stand out, right? In small ponds, they're welcoming places for those on the inside. They have all the support that comes from community, friendship, and where innovation and individuality are not frowned upon. Why are they not frowned upon? Because you're not breaking the mold. You're not doing well, we don't do that. The salon has had this forever. This is how it works. In the small pond, we're open to change and we're open to deviations from the norm. And we all have to find our own small pond. And if you can create your own small pond and invite people in, students per se, then that's the journey that's where impressionism comes from, right?
You know what? I can't help but think how it's amazing. This is the beauty of reading a bunch of different books and kind of like seeing the connections between all of them, because I'm also reading the book, Andrew. I'm not as far as you are in the book, but I'm rereading Marcus Aurelius's Meditations. And there was something that he said in the book, and I'm going to badly paraphrase it here, but very much like great companies, great individuals, great teachers, and in this case, these great painters, these people who are great, who are high achievers, let's put it this way, they always find a way to transform their weakness into some sort of strength, which is exactly what they did there. It's if you think about it, it's a rather amazing and even touching feat, I would say, because they took what should have held them back, the fact that they might not be accepted into the salon, what in fact might be holding you back right this very second as well, and they use that to move forward. And it's this very good example of how the impediment to action, this goes back to Marcus Aurelius, and Mike is going to remember this. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. And I can't help but think about how these impressionists used the obstacle to advance action. Beautiful. Love that story.